The story begins in the library. College student Xue Yu loves reading books because they allow her to learn what people thought hundreds of years ago. Suddenly, the girl's phone vibrated. In the chat, the friends were discussing another trip to the mall to look at the new lipstick, as well as to sit and chat and drink tea. Xue Yu had to finish her essay, so she had to decline. The girls in the chat were outraged that their friend was a real bookworm and that she should have not been invited in the first place. Yue Yu was a fan of books and a fan of works of any genre. Because immersing herself in the process itself, she seemed to be transported to another world. Suddenly realizing that the girl had started reading a random book again, she nearly tore her hair out. She was once again distracted instead of looking for materials for her essay. Xue Yu put the book on the shelf because she needed to be busy, not read everything that came to hand. Before she climbed down the ladder, another work with an interesting cover caught her attention. It was a mysterious, mystical novel about the history of the ancient state of Jinglin, one of whose great rulers was Jinwo. He instantly put an end to the rebellion caused by the actions of the previous monarch. With his fury, Jinwo extinguished the flames of war and brought the Jingling kingdom to glory compared to the Boer Empire. A king with great popular support and at the same time a harsh dictator. Jinwo, nicknamed Reinhard, is the 14th monarch of Jingling, who has many outstanding achievements. However, he is known for his hatred of women. During Jinwo's reign, no women held any government or military positions. The women's academy established by previous rulers disappeared. This iron monarch, for various reasons, expelled all women from the government and sent them to the provinces, leaving them the opportunity to be only guardians of the home. Jinwo did not even spare his own children, always preferred boys and had a great desire to pass the throne exclusively to his son. But the main concubine was childless, and in the royal harem, 6 girls were born in a row. By the time the queen gave birth, the abbot had predicted the heir, Jinling, who would lead the country to even greater greatness. All the people of Jingling froze in anticipation. Upon reading this, Xue Yu lost her balance and fell off the ladder. Suddenly, a picture of the official residence of Jingling appeared in the girl's mind. Xue Yu looked so real, as if she were actually there, and the king was incredible. To her great surprise, she was able to hear the news that the queen had given birth. The girl couldn't understand how this happened and assumed that she had somehow traveled back in time and ended up in this kingdom. And then events began to take a strange turn. The queen told Jinwo that she had named her newborn daughter Xue Yu. After that, the girl realized that she had found herself in the body of this baby. Jinwo looked at his daughter with disdain. Wangguan Square was actively discussing the queen's birth. Some believed that a princess had been born and that she had inherited the king's beauty. Some knew that the king did not like princesses, even considering the fact that he already had 6 daughters. The worst thing would be if another girl was born. After all the concubines had been expelled before. Jinwo arrived at the square to present to the people of Jingling that he had an heir. However, Xue Yu, who was involved in this story, was not this boy. The little gentleman who was cheered by the crowd was not her, even though he was called the queen's child. The maid informed Her Highness that the king had already announced that she had given birth to a boy and named him Zhao Ban. The queen felt sorry for her daughter Xue Yu. Instead, the girl found herself in the world of that book. She was transported to the continent of Xinyue to the kingdom of Jingling. Jinwo was saddened to discover that the 7th child was also a girl, and he did not want to accept that she would become the next monarch. So without a moment's hesitation, Jinwo introduced Zhao Ban to the whole world. The king named his younger brother's son the queen's son, and to keep it a secret, they got rid of the real mother by executing her. Everyone who knew the truth was forbidden to tell, and now Xue Yu was going through these events herself. It seemed to her like some kind of nightmare. In her past life, her parents died early, and she wanted a complete family more than anything in the world. Xue Yu speculated that this wish had probably come true in this life. After all, she needed it too much. Jinwo was disappointed that a girl was born. Xue Yu, in the body of a child, could not make out the king's constant mumbling with a stony face. Apparently she really found herself in this place and there was no way back. Ji Nuo remarked that there was no point in having daughters, because they were all the same ignorant and fragile. The girl was confused because she definitely didn't want an asshole father. She was hurt by the way Ji Nuo squeezed her. The girl is convinced that the man has already forgotten that he once looked fragile and ignorant. Ji Nuo ordered Zhao Ban to be brought to him. He reminded her of the abbot's prediction. The child the queen bore him would be the heir to the throne of Jingling and would bring greatness to the kingdom. Ji Nuo ordered the queen to remember that the boy was now her son and his heir, and the king ordered the girl to be sent to the Tower of the Celestials. This is a place for sacrifices to the gods, and death awaits those who get there. However, it is rumored that their souls may be chosen to serve in the heavenly office. Shui Yu was not thrilled with what she heard. The queen tearfully begged the king to spare her daughter, for after all she was her own flesh and blood. She promised to send her away from the palace and in such a way that not a single soul would know of her existence. Her Highness knew that Jinwo would not let anyone know that his seventh child was a girl. Zhaoban's mother was executed to keep this secret. All who knew the true state of affairs were forbidden to speak of it under pain of death. And now the queen's daughter had suffered the same fate. Jinwo said that the queen should make sure that he never saw Shui Yu again. The queen did so, sending her daughter outside the kingdom. Although she was not hurt by the separation, the girl's life depended on it, and the queen hoped that Sui Yu would take care of herself. Barely born, she was sent into exile forever. The biological father wanted to kill his child just because she was a girl. Shui Yu convinced him that the king was an even bigger scumbag than expected. Baron Weil's maids gossiped that he had returned with a child in his arms. He had 3 sons of his own, and they believed that the baron had fathered another child on the side. No one expected a man to be so capable and sympathized with the girl who had fallen into this misfortune. The baron always seemed so loving and gentle, but in reality he turned out to be just like everyone else. The maids also felt sorry for Lady Catherine, who was evidently devastated. Lady Catherine became upset after reading the letter. Suddenly, her middle son, Arnaldo, burst into her room. He overheard the maids talking and demanded an explanation. The woman was indignant at such indecent behavior. The calm and reserved eldest son of Baron Morel apologized to his mother and father for not checking on his brother. Baron Stefan Weil assured them that he was not angry and invited all his sons to come into the chambers. He introduced Shui Yu and said that from today on, the girl was their sister. Stefan asked his sons to get along well with the new family member. Arnaldo angrily declared that his father had brought a bastard girl into the house and was demanding that they accept her. Morel grabbed his brother to keep him from going crazy. Arnaldo managed to declare that his father was an old man and had disgraced their entire family. Little 4-year-old Avery asked about the identity of his mistress. Catherine's mother said that the matter is closed because she has forgiven her husband, so the children's indignation is irrelevant. Arnold is convinced that his mother did not deserve this treatment. He said that his father should go to his mistress. Catherine once again noted that the matter was closed and told her son to shut up. After all, Shui Yu was now a member of their family. Arnaldo scornfully remarked that he wasn't going to mess with the bastard, because she had rotten blood flowing through her. Catherine asked Morel to keep an eye on her middle brother to make sure he didn't do anything stupid. Morel cast a cold, sidelong glance at Shui Yu, who immediately sensed that it would be difficult for them to become friends. Catherine remarked to her husband that it would be difficult for the children to accept this. Stefan pointed out that there was nothing they could do as they owed a lot to that person. Therefore, Shui Yu's origins must remain a secret. Catherine doesn't want to hide the truth from the children. As soon as Stefan returned, the rumors were already spreading in the district. If the children continue to believe the lie, then their family is over. The man assured that the fewer people who knew the truth, the better. And so he insisted on sticking to the version that many had come to believe. That's how Sui Yu came to the Whale family. Although her named brothers were not very happy with her, the others were very kind to her. She was a strong and healthy girl weighing 4 kilograms and 400 g. The maids recalled that when young Mr. Avery was born, he weighed only 3 kilograms. Shui Yu remarked that adults don't remember themselves as babies. She wondered if her parents were as happy when they nursed her in her past life. Shui Yu was confused when she was born with a mother, and others did whatever they wanted with her. If in that life she had only known that her birth had brought such happiness to those around her, she would have been much happier. Catherine was walking in the garden with the girl and the maids. It was then that Arnaldo was playing with his dog. He noticed his sister, whom he hated, and an idea came to his mind. The boy threw the ball towards his sister, and the dog immediately went after the toy. Shui Yu flew out of Catherine's hands in fright. Stefan was furious at the middle son's actions. Everyone was scared when Shui Yu fell, but luckily she didn't break. The girl was unharmed, although she was in a lot of pain. The doctor said the baby was fine, just a few bruises, so he recommended an ointment that would make it go away quickly. Catherine couldn't imagine how Arnaldo could do that. The woman appealed to the fact that Shui Yu could have beaten herself to death. She threatened her son that she would get rid of his dog so that he would understand the seriousness of the situation. Catherine asked where his kindness and conscience had gone and said she was ashamed to have such a son. She punished Arnaldo with 3 months of house arrest. The woman also told him to go to his sister and apologize for his actions. Arnaldo clenched his hand into a fist. Muriel went to his brother and put his hand on his shoulder and called him a fool. Avery's younger brother decided to tell Arnaldo a secret, that the girl was a witch, and therefore she should not be angry. Muriel asked his brother how he knew about this. The boy pointed out that if he used forbidden magic on ordinary people, punishment would follow. Avery asked him to have mercy. After all, he cast the lowest level spell on the girl to make her grow fiery boils, but he found that Shui Yu was immune to black magic, which proves that she is a witch. At the moment Shui Yu fell, everyone was too worried, and probably only she had time to notice. Arnaldo's expression was filled with fear and worry. The boy didn't really want to hurt her, just to make fun of the stranger he saw in Shui Yu. The girl started to smile when she saw Arnaldo. The middle brother was very surprised and touched Shui Yu's hand. Stephen noticed that it was just an impulsive act of a child, and now they get along with each other. Shui Yu was not injured in the fall, so she was not at all angry with her older brother. Arnaldo was fascinated by the girl. Avery pointed out to Morel that their brother had fallen under a spell. He added that it doesn't look like a breastfed baby. Muriel noted that Avery also doesn't look like his 4-year-old self. Arnaldo kept begging his mother to come in and spend time with his little sister. Catherine couldn't take it anymore and sent her son outside to play, as she planned to put Shui Yu to bed. The boy noticed that his mother and father had put him under house arrest, which was why he was sitting at home, and he asked why his sister was going to bed so early. Arnaldo was so engrossed in Shui Yu that he completely forgot about his dog. Catherine did allow him to stay with his sister, but his son made sure she didn't wake up. The son assured her that he would look after Shui Yu while the mother could rest. Catherine noticed that Arnaldo had become more mature, and this touched her, but she was not sure if this was a good thing. Arnaldo couldn't resist his little sister, so he started waking her up to play. Shui Yu woke up and couldn't understand what was happening. It was as if she had a dream that a whole flock of crows was pecking at her, and it turned out to be her brother. She began to wave her arms so that Arnaldo would not tease her. However, the boy thought that his sister wanted to be held. Shui Yu was not happy that Arnaldo had woken her up, but her brother couldn't hear her thoughts. On the contrary, he thought that his sister really liked him, so she asked for his arms. Avery had never done anything like that. Arnaldo remarked that Shui Yu smelled nice and that she didn't annoy him as much anymore. The girl hoped that her brother wouldn't let her on the floor. She was also very uncomfortable because Arnaldo is not at all good at holding children. The boy began to circle his sister. He liked to think that Shui Yu loved him. Considering that Shui Yu loved Arnaldo so much, he would go above and beyond to accept her as his sister. In her past life, she was an orphan. Therefore, at first, Shui Yu considered her rebirth in this world as a punishment. But now she has a completely different opinion. Now she really has a family. Catherine had been personally babysitting Shui Yu for the past few months. She noticed that the girl was so tired that she couldn't finish her bottle of milk. The maid assumed it was because of Arnaldo. After all, the boy had been playing with his sister for a long time. However, Shui Yu, on the contrary, seemed to Arnaldo to be like a toy, and he had tired her to death. Although Baron Whale didn't show much concern, at least he didn't treat Shui Yu like a child, which she really liked. He allowed her to be present while he taught his sons. Stefan noticed that Morel had passed the selection for the Imperial School. Therefore, he was concerned about the academic success of his middle son, Arnaldo. The Baron decided to test his middle son's knowledge of mathematics, and as it turned out, 4-year-old Avery knew much more. Shui Yu had the opportunity to better understand the world she had found herself in. She sat down closer to Arnaldo and began to look at his notes. The father noted that if the middle son did poorly in school, he would send him to a church school. A church school is an institution that specializes in learning and self-improvement, a school for monks and clergy. However, Arnaldo wanted to pass the selection for a military academy. His main goal is to become a knight. The educational model of this world is similar to the European model of the early Middle Ages. The clergy holds the monopoly, and secular education is generally represented by the imperial school at the royal palace and the military academy for aristocrats. Educational institutions had not yet been established. Since King Jinuo ascended the throne, there was not a single illiterate knight left in the Jingling Kingdom. As soon as Shui Yu heard the mention of the king, she was indignant. After all, Jinuo was a scumbag who irritated her incredibly. Stefan asked his son the answer to the second problem, and Shui Yu pointed her finger at Arnaldo's notes to the correct answer. His brother began to rejoice that he was right. He started kissing Shui Yu for her help. She remarked that his brother lacked the base and therefore he should practice more. Avery declared that Arnaldo was a fraud. Arnaldo indignantly asked who his brother called a fraud. Avery is sure that it was Shui who gave the correct answer, because she is a witch. The middle brother told Avery not to talk nonsense. Stefan sternly stated that there was no need to fight, after which he told Arnaldo to go do his homework with Morel. As for Avery, rumors reached his father that his son was trying to send a reason to his younger sister. Zhue Yu was angry that Avery dared to use magic from this world on her. She was even ready to strangle the boy. Avery assured that he just wanted his sister to stop crying. Moreover, nothing worked, so he believes that he does not have enough strength to cause harm. He also had the assumption that Shui Yu was a foreign-born. These are those who were born with immunity to magic, generally witches or the cursed. Shui Yu was quite indignant at this. She was convinced that her little brother was up to something and was now talking nonsense. Avery glanced at his sister and began to look at her suspiciously. The girl watched her brother in bewilderment. For a moment, it seemed to her that he had guessed that she was not from this world. But even if so, she was not afraid of this little beast. She's going to show Avery what kind of power adults have. But while that's not so important, right now Shui Yu wants to figure out what kind of magic this is. An unknown young lady attacked Shui Yu. It seemed like 15 years had passed, and the little princess looked all grown up. Shui Yu warned the bully that she would call her older brother to give her a beating. The attacker contemptuously pointed out that Shui Yu was useless to anyone, but let her call her brother. The girl grabbed the baron's daughter by the hair, saying that such a weak orphan could not have brothers. Then the boys appeared and confirmed the opposite. Arnaldo took Shui Yu's hand and noticed that her beloved brother had arrived, after which the girl woke up and discovered that it was just a dream. Although she now really has 3 older brothers, which is still hard to believe, Shui Yu could already imagine how her brothers would grow up to be so cool. Arnaldo from the dream was so kind and gentle to her. If the current one was a little more sensible, Shui Yu would be able to tolerate him. Nothing was clear with Morel yet. However, Shui Yu was sure of one thing, that Devil Avery would not be a good brother because he used magic on her. Catherine noticed that Shui Yu had already woken up. She planned to wash and dress the girl and then go for a walk in the city. The maids were discussing Lady Catherine's upcoming weekly outing. They were all in anticipation of whom the Baroness would take with her this time. After all, Catherine is extremely generous to those who go to the city with her. After all, you can get a lot of gifts. Also, this time she is taking Shui Yu with her. The maids noticed that Catherine was so kind-hearted, treating little Shui Yu as her own daughter, and the girl herself was very sweet and did not cry or get cranky at all. Although Shui Yu was annoyed that Catherine changed her clothes so many times, she patiently let her do it. Arnaldo tried to convince his mother to let him join the trip. Catherine remarked that she was going to buy things for girls, and therefore her son would simply not be interested in it. Her father was also going to the city, so her mother suggested that Arnaldo join him. The son pointed out that in this case he would not see Shui Yu for a long time. He was sure that his sister would cry if he was not there. The mother assured her son that she could handle her daughter. Catherine remarked to Shui Yu that a walk in the fresh air was just what the children needed. At least Arnaldo wouldn't bother her. Shui Yu was fascinated by the people watching and the stone houses. The style of this city reminded her of Dubrovnik in Croatia. From everywhere, from time to time, the tower of the celestials and priests are heard. The inhabitants of this world believe in the existence of gods. It is likely that it was they who endowed people with the ability to magic. Shui Yu wondered what this magic was and whether everyone had similar powers. Catherine showed the girl her favorite pastry shop, Arnaldo's, and suggested that she buy some sweets along with everything else. The woman assumed that Shui Yu would also like this place. The 3 young ladies noticed Catherine and the child and assumed that this was the same girl everyone was talking about. Shui Yu had a bad feeling after meeting the stranger. The women were not expecting to see Catherine, considering the events in their family. It seemed that none of them would dare to appear in public. One of the young ladies pointed out that Baron Weil had indeed gone too far. She also wondered if the man had still not revealed who he was having an affair with. The woman felt that the Baron was trying to protect his mistress, completely oblivious to his wife's feelings. Shui Yu noticed that behind the stranger's sympathetic smile was a mockery. Another woman also decided to compassionate with Catherine, but her indifferent look betrayed her true feelings. Catherine smiled awkwardly, noting that it was all trifles. The two women whispered among themselves about Shui Yu's real mother. They couldn't understand how a man could do such a thing. The girl noticed that these women were insulting Catherine. No matter what world she was in, regardless of age or social status, the strong always insult the weak. The lady in the hat added that although the girl would not claim the inheritance, if Catherine continued to let her husband off the hook, she would not be limited to one bastard. She offered to help Catherine negotiate with the abbot and send the child to the monastery. At that moment, Shui Yu burped at the woman. Catherine awkwardly remarked that it was not appropriate for educated ladies to discuss such things in front of a small child. Shui Yu was tempted to point out that it was an accident, but all the girl could say was the word "mom." Catherine was stunned by the situation. She almost cried with joy. Catherine shared with the women that Shui Yu had become very attached to her. As soon as the girl noticed her, she would instantly stop crying and being moody. The Baroness added that although they were not related to each other, Shui Yu had become closer to her than her own. She asked the young ladies not to take this to heart. After all, it happens that a loving child can become more important than any life situation. The woman in the hat grimaced in annoyance, but remained silent. Instead, the other lady supported Catherine. She asked the woman with the hat whether her sons were under the supervision of her husband's parents. The young lady decided not to bring up the subject and remembered that she had completely forgotten to introduce her interlocutor, Catherine. The woman who supported the Baroness is called Lucia, and she currently has virtually no way to leave the royal palace. The queen herself chose her older sister to be the little prince's maid. Therefore, she devotes all her time to caring for His Highness's favorite. Lucia noted that it was all thanks to the king's grace. However, her sister still felt uneasy. After all, it is rumored that the prince's previous maid was executed for unknown reasons. And since then, the maids in the palace have been changed every 6 months. The lady in the hat pointed out that at least Lucia's sister was making a fortune. Shui Yu noticed that everything was happening as stated in the book. To prevent information from leaking, Zhao Ban's father was extremely careful with the court servants. The book also noted that the entire Weil family treated Shui Yu very well. The girl spent a short but peaceful childhood with them. Unfortunately, she grew up as an ordinary and incapable child. After Ji Nuo and Zhao Ban learned of Shui Yu's whereabouts, her life turned into a nightmare from which she was destined to never escape. She was a puppet for the rest of her days. Shui Yu, who found herself in the body of a baby, was unwilling to accept this fate. However, the girl knows too little not to repeat the fate of Shui Yu in the book. She needed to know more, and she decided to start with magic. Shui Yu noticed how many books Catherine had collected for Arnaldo and wondered if he could even read. She noticed a book about magic and started reaching for it. Catherine was surprised that the girl liked the book, since she didn't even know the letters. She spread out the things in front of Shui Yu and watched what her daughter would choose. Shui Yu immediately picked up the book on magic. Catherine shared with the maids that she knew right away that the baby would choose the book because she wouldn't rest until she bought it. The maids were amazed. It seemed to them as if the goddess of wisdom herself had come down to earth in the guise of this girl. Shui Yu noticed that the writing in this world was completely different from the writing she had used in her previous life. However, surprisingly, once she got here, she began to understand everything written in the book. On the Sinyu continent, there are 2 versions of the origin of magic. Some believe that the gods, when creating this world, spread their power throughout the land. And spells are a kind of password for unlocking these powers. People with a specific body structure are able to use these spells to endlessly unleash various divine powers. Others tend to think that the world created by the gods is full of different elements, and spells are able to arrange these elements in a specific order. And people born with a certain body structure have enough power to resonate with the elements through spells. That's how magic is born. Shui Yu understood that to master magic, one must learn spells. They must be learned from simple to complex, starting strictly with elementary spells. The maid began to play with Shui Yu's rattle. The girl noticed that the main disadvantage of being a child was that adults would never leave her alone. Shui Yu noticed that Morel was quietly and peacefully reading a book on the windowsill. She was jealous that no living soul would dare to disturb him. Catherine couldn't understand why Shuiyu had stopped sleeping recently. The girl kept her hands on the book. The woman wondered how the little girl could even understand what was written there. Avery muttered under his breath that he had already said that Shuiyu was a witch and was just pretending to be a child. Stefan pointed out that the child was growing, and that was perfectly normal. The Baron was convinced that in time Shuiyu would be old enough to sit at the table and eat dinner with them. He was looking forward to seeing the little girl grow up. The lights went out in the dining room and silence fell. Arnaldo began to panic as if it were the work of a ghost. Catherine reassured her son, assuring him that it was just a simple short circuit. She asked not to scare her sister with her screams. Avery remarked that his middle brother was just a coward. Stefan pointed out that the electricity would be out for a while and suggested lighting candles. Shuiyu noticed that there was electricity in this world. Muriel used magic to instantly light all the candles in the house. The girl was pleasantly surprised. Muriel was quietly reading a book in his room when he heard a knock on the door. Opening it, he saw Shuiyu lying on the floor. His older brother picked up the girl like a kitten and carried her to her mother. Muriel asked the maids to keep a closer eye on Shuiyu, as she crawls wherever she pleases. This is not the first time he has found the girl like this. Shuiyu was upset that she was thrown out like that. Catherine assumed that Shuiyu really liked Muriel, which was why she was going to him. The boy said that Shuiyu was distracting him. The girl was embarrassed because this was how the world presented her with her first problem, which would be difficult to solve. Muriel. No matter how hard Shuiyu tries, he remains completely indifferent to her. 15-year-old Muriel is the very definition of a diligent student, and according to the girl, a nerd. Since general education was not yet widespread in Jinling, Muriel stood out for his intelligence and abilities. At the age of 10, he was chosen by the royal sages. As an exception, Muriel was enrolled in the imperial school, a place where members of the royal family study. A boy with a cold temperament who is not interested in anything except his studies. Arnaldo resented having to go himself when his brother needed to bring something, even though he really liked being here. Shuiyu was thinking about how to solve the problem with Muriel. The older brother went out accompanied by the young ladies. One of them suggested that Muriel go out to dinner later. However, the boy took Shuiyu in his arms and said that he had to take care of his sister. Both the sister and the middle brother were quite shocked. Arnaldo asked Muriel why he had lied. The eldest brother replied that it was the Duke's daughter, and he did not want to allow himself to offend her. The title of Baron is the lowest in the hierarchy, and Muriel is the son of a Baron. The guy looked at Shuiyu. He never thought that this prop would be so useful. Shuiyu was watching the lesson in the Imperial School auditorium with interest. The professor was explaining how to create a fireball. First, it was necessary to assess the composition of the elements in your environment, the difference in humidity and temperature. Next, gather the element around your palm, keeping in mind that spells may vary. The professor added that if students want to master high-level spells, they need to systematically study various disciplines, such as chemistry, history. Shuiyu had tried to gain Muriel's trust and affection, but it was all in vain, and now success had caught up with her quite by accident. Muriel started to poke the girl's cheeks with his finger. Shuiyu couldn't understand what was happening and hoped not to burst into tears at a random moment. The Duke's daughter again asked her fate and decided to invite Muriel, but the boy constantly made excuses that he needed to take care of his sister. On the weekend, Catherine and her eldest and middle sons and daughter were walking around the city. Arnaldo sadly pointed out that he should be the one to carry Shuiyu, because she loved him the most. The middle brother insultedly said that Muriel was his stupid older brother. Shuiyu noted that this was the beginning of a new chapter in her integration into this world. 5 years passed. Stefan wrote a report to the queen, in which he noted that everything was fine with the little princess. She was intelligent, inquisitive, and kind. Everyone who met her praised her. The Baron added that the girl likes to read quietly next to Muriel. She also loves playing outdoors with Arnaldo. They are so young and active. Stefan noticed that Sua was indeed a fairy sent to them by the gods. He believes it was all because she inherited the queen's great blood. Baron Whale hoped that Shuiyu would soon be reunited with her highness. After writing the letter, he gave it to his wife to send to the secret messenger. The Baron was afraid that this was the last letter to her, since there was to relieve them of the obligation to write letters. Catherine assured that as long as Shuiyu was okay, she was at ease. The maids wanted to listen to Shuiyu again, because the little lady had the best fairy tales. The girl said that this time she would not tell about the prince and princess, but would change the characters. She didn't expect her fairy tales to be so popular. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The book said that it was very important to win people's hearts and establish a connection. Shueyu is determined this time not to be helpless and bullied. She begins to tell the story of Little Red Riding Hood. According to her, one day Little Red Riding Hood went to the forest to take food to her grandmother. Stefan emphasized that Shueyu was an extraordinary person. Catherine agreed that the girl was very intelligent and caring for a 5-year-old. Zhu seemed to her like a child with the behavior of an adult. The Baron suggested that this might even be a bad thing. After all, if you were prominent in their country, you might be chosen by one of the royal family members or ministers. Stefan is afraid that she would like Shueyu to live a quiet life and not be in danger, instead of being at court. Moreover, the girl's personal life must be kept secret. Morel visited his parents' rooms. He noticed that Shueyu was already over 5 years old. When he and his brothers were 3 years old, their mother hired their first teacher. The eldest son added that no matter what direction the parents choose for Shueyu, it is important for her sister to learn the basics. Morel assured that he spends most of his time at school, so he cannot constantly teach his sister. He didn't understand what his parents were trying to achieve. The boy noticed that Shueyu was very smart, even smarter than him at that age. So if she gets a good education, everyone will turn their attention to her in the future. However, this is what Vile fears the most. Catherine said she wanted Shueyu to always be by her side. Morel didn't understand why her mother wanted that. After all, parents always wanted, or their sons and daughters aspired to fame. Stefan added that Shueyu is too young, so it is too early to worry about her fate. The maids heard that the Baron was quarreling with the young master, and they wondered why. One of them suggested that it was because of Lady Shueyu. Morel had always been indifferent, so they didn't think that he would contradict his father because of young Miss Shueyu. Avery listened to all this, and he wasn't thrilled. The father shut his eldest son's mouth, as he was not ready to discuss the matter. Morel said that he did not understand why Shueyu was given special treatment, even if she was an illegitimate child. Muriel left the Baron's office angrily. Avery, on the other hand, was curious as to why his older brother was only concerned about the fate of the little witch. Avery used to be very loved by his mother and brothers. He was once introduced to the family as well as Shueyu, noting that the brothers should take care of the new member Vile. After Shueyu came along, everything changed. He tried to spend more time with his mother, but she was busy taking care of her younger sister. Avery was annoyed that everyone was dancing around the illegitimate child. He also asked Morel to go to school with him, but his brother refused, saying that outsiders were not allowed. The boy didn't understand why Shueyu had all this. He practically hated his sister. He directly told Shueyu that he would never accept her. Shueyu was confused, but accepted the fact that it was impossible to please everyone. It was obvious to the girl that Avery didn't like her because of Morel. In the Whale household, her illegitimate daughter was not accepted by her younger brother. Shueyu spent time with Arnaldo in his room. The boy almost cried while doing his homework. He was sad that his best years were passing by. He wanted to find a way to avoid studying and go play instead. Shueyu thought that Morel wanted her to get the same basic education as her brothers. However, Stefan and Catherine did not approve of this. The Baron was worried that Shueyu would get a good education, and if, like Morel, someone in the palace liked her, then her personal secret would be revealed. History books stated that the girl died because her identity was revealed. But if she doesn't get an education, she will become an ordinary weak person. Shueyu can only accept her fate. Both her brother and father's positions are correct. However, she cannot let them fight over her. Arnaldo, with tears in his eyes from the heaviness of life, asked what Shueyu was thinking about. The sister said that she had to find Morel, and then she would return. The middle brother was horrified to assume that Shueyu didn't like spending time with him because his sister thought he was stupid if he couldn't do his homework. Shueyu shared her thoughts with Morel. She was convinced that this was not possible. He didn't understand why his sister didn't want a teacher. The boy assumed that Shueyu was confident that she could study on her own. Muriel also thought that his sister did not want him to quarrel with his father. Since she had probably heard that if a child is born out of wedlock, it will be treated with special consideration. Muriel stated that if Shueyu confirmed the suspicions, it would embarrass their family. The girl noted that she doesn't care what people think. After all, her parents and brothers love her, and that's enough for her. Morel asked if his sister thought he loved them too. She smiled and assured him that she did. The boy patted Shuiyu on the head and said that he would never argue with his parents again. The elder brother asked his sister to wait, as he had a plan. Shuiyu asked the maid if a foreign guest had arrived at the manor. They replied that the Baron and Lady Catherine had mentioned that he was a distinguished guest and that he should be in the living room right now. The guest praised Morel, saying that he was incredible as always. He was here solely because of the boy's future development, which the guest wanted to discuss with the Weil family. Recently, this mysterious guest had been appealing to His Highness to expand their country's educational institutions. Thus, the Enlightenment proposal was created. But one law was not enough, and without good personnel it is ineffective. Doctor of Science David is convinced that their country needs well-trained people. The Doctor of Sciences suggested to Vale that Muriel should go into the field of education in the future. As far as he knows, the eldest son, Vale, plans to continue his studies. David hopes that Morel will pass the exam and then work in education. The Doctor of Sciences suggests that the eldest son's plans must be approved by both parents. Baron Weil said it was a wonderful offer. His wife Catherine supported him, adding that it was a great honor for their family to receive recognition from Dr. David. Shuiyu suddenly burst into the living room and noticed her parents and older brother in the company of a man she didn't know. The girl immediately apologized for intruding, but Morel invited her to join in. Dr. David was amazed that the cold and indifferent Muriel had a sister he loved. The boy noted that it was more of a mutual respect than love. David noticed that his brother's assessment of Shuiyu was different from usual. Muriel added that in time, the teacher would also evaluate his sister's skills. Morel insisted that Shuiyu greet Dr. David, a famous scholar. The Doctor of Science was mentioned in a history book, Dakshuishi of the Jingling Kingdom, a pioneering educator. He is the favorite of King Jinuo. Stefan immediately understood that Morel wanted to gain David's favor regarding Shuiyu. If the girl entered the royal school, her identity might be in danger. Stephen couldn't let Shuiyu show herself too well. The girl, however, did not want to arouse the doctor's curiosity. She hid behind Morel's leg to pretend to be shy. The elder brother was confused, but Stefan found it to his advantage. The Baron even suggested that Shuiyu could see through him. Morel asked his sister to name the 100 digits after the decimal point in pi. Shuiyu awkwardly said that she couldn't do it. His brother noticed that something was wrong and that this was definitely not his Shuiyu. After that, Dr. David mused that Morel had praised his sister too much. Shuiyu breathed a sigh of relief. The critical moment had passed, and the scientist was not interested in her at all. However, they had just talked about Her Highness, the biological mother of Shuiyu's body. The girl had not seen the queen since she was born. She wanted to secretly take a peek. Morel pointed out that King Jinuo was a great strategist, having suppressed the chaos in the southwest and the Linbiai Peninsula all these years. Very soon, the rest of the Lin clan would be under the control of their country. The boy added that Jinuo was the greatest ruler in the history of their country. David agreed, noting that the king was invincible in wars, but he needed to appease the queen to stabilize the peace. Queen Alida is from a noble family. She is gentle and kind, and is also a blessing to the state. Shuiyu heard that the famous poet Hyde wrote a eulogy. Alita is a fragile flower that will never wither or die because her summer will never end. Everyone present was shocked, and Shuiyu was puzzled. The girl unconsciously quoted aloud a poem about Her Highness from a history book. Dr. David applauded Shuiyu. Morel didn't even know that his sister knew this poem. Shuiyu began to make excuses, saying that she had heard people say that Her Highness was the kindest and gentlest in the world. There was a bard in the manor, and it was supposedly from him that the girl had heard the poem. Dr. David said that he had found a good candidate. He handed Shuiyu a letter. Her Highness organizes a banquet in the capital every year and invites various people to it. Queen Alida highly values educated people, so David is sure that this is a great opportunity for Shuiyu to be seen by the bright eyes of the state. The scholar added that if Her Highness knew that a 5-year-old girl knew by heart a poem praising her, she would be very happy. Shuiyu timidly looked at her father as if asking for permission. Stefan understood that it was quite risky to let his daughter participate in the banquet. However, this event was being hosted by Her Highness herself, who had not seen Shuiyu for 5 years. This is the best opportunity to meet his daughter. Stefan placed his hand on Shuiyu's head approvingly, then thanked David for the invitation, as it was an honor for them. The Weil family was busy preparing for the banquet. Catherine was thrilled to finally be able to attend the royal event. Since the decline of the Weil family, their family simply disappeared from the radar for 20 long years. Catherine sobbed with foreboding, completely forgetting that the palace was a dangerous place. Arnaldo was choosing a hat for himself. He didn't like any of the top hats because they were all ordinary and didn't suit his face. Wylam was also reminded of the rules of etiquette, including that it was permissible to kiss Her Majesty's hand. Avery was none too pleased by the commotion. Juayu persistently asked the third brother to join the banquet. However, she was defeated. Avery flatly refused to go. David, a doctor of science, tried to convince King Jinuo that all people, regardless of their status, should be educated. He reminded them that the royal family descended from God, who created this world. Among the common people, there are talented people. David gave the example of his student, who surpasses him 1,000 times. The scientist is sure that the king should worry about the happiness of the kingdom. Only then will the talents gifted by God and its ruler appear in Jingling. If they provide education to every inhabitant of the kingdom now, there will be more people who will become a pillar in the future. David emphasized that this was for the welfare of Jingling. Jinwo agreed to the scholar's persuasion and ordered a decree on general education to be created for the elders in the council to consider. The scholar asked the king to grant him another request. His student had already been adopted into the family, and in the future he would become a reliable support for the Royal University and probably a new teacher. This student has a sister who is legally barred from education, but she is very talented. The king indignantly declared that he would not indulge the desires of others. Evid assured His Highness that this child was special. After all, at the age of 5, she was able to memorize a rare poem. In his opinion, the girl was very docile and intelligent, but since Jinwo hated women immensely, they were forbidden to study. Du asked for permission for her to study. David added that the girl was of noble birth, the 4th child of the Weil family. During the reign of the previous king, this family had become famous for its repeated military exploits. Jinuo got bored, then pretended to understand everything and let the scientist go. When the doctor of sciences left, the king crumpled up the girl's dossier and threw it in the trash. The banquet began, the entire Weil family was gathered, even Avery was persuaded to come. Juayu finally saw the palace again, and she had an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. The delicate scent of the queen hangs in the air. 5 years have passed. Juayu has returned and is determined to see her mother. Arnaldo was amazed at the number of guests. There were many aristocrats and visitors he had never seen before. Murrell asked his brother not to exaggerate. After all, it is just a handout from the royal family, designed to appease and maintain control over their vassals. The policy of containment is a management method. It is used by ancient dynasties to tame and control independent territories and vassals. Her Highness the Queen comes from a noble family. Alita's family has been renowned for centuries for their military exploits, conquering territories for the kingdom. Her Highness's grace and generosity allow Jinling to continue to develop. And with the permission of His Majesty the Queen, she organizes a banquet every month. Catherine was disappointed that Alita could not personally attend due to health reasons. And obviously Juayu will not be able to meet her biological mother. Catherine wished Her Highness a speedy recovery. Juayu reluctantly watched the events unfold. She was upset, so she asked her father to go to the restroom and assured him that she could leave on her own. According to the novel, Juayu never saw the queen again. However, now that she was in the palace, she probably influenced the course of events. She hoped that this time she would be able to see her mother. Suddenly, the girl realized that she had wandered into a completely unfamiliar place. In her past life, Juayu had an innocent but incurable illness. Now she was panicking, not knowing where to go. She was ready to call for help. How could she have come across none other than the scoundrel of a king? Earlier, Catherine's mother had insisted that the girl not speak to anyone in the palace except the queen. Therefore, Juayu had no choice but to run away. Jinwo was puzzled when he saw the girl in his manor. He grabbed her in his arms and began to examine her. Juayu could feel a terrifying aura from the king that was impossible to ignore. He was like a devil. The girl could already imagine the knights attacking her. And Jinwo strictly, and without any regret, orders her to be killed. However, in reality, the king has only just begun to take an interest in the girl's personality. But Juayu was so scared that she couldn't say a word. He wouldn't kill her because he didn't know who she was yet, because the girl couldn't stop shaking. Juayu noticed Jinwo's expression. It seemed to her as if he was sympathizing with her. But later she realized that it was a completely different feeling. Disgust. His Highness noticed that before him was a frightened, weak creature staring in surprise like a homeless stray dog. Jinuo asked the guard where the child came from. He was informed that there was a banquet going on in the palace and that she was probably from there. The guard noticed that the girl had insulted His Highness, and they were ready to deal with her. However, Jinuo simply ordered the girl to be taken back to the west. He noticed that the child, like a worthless vagrant, resembled him from a long time ago. The guard led Shuiyu to the hall and ordered the court ladies to escort the girl inside. The guests began to whisper, and when they saw the guard, they noted that luck was on their side. Shuiyu guessed that the luck in understanding these people was that they left her with a head on her shoulders. Catherine breathed a sigh of relief when she saw her daughter. She thought she was lost. The daughter apologized for causing trouble and explained that she had gotten lost and the guards had brought her back. Shuiyu decided not to say that she had also met that scumbag Jinuo because it would make the family even more worried. Catherine took the girl's hand and led her inside. This time, Shuiyu was very lucky. Jue lay in her bed and thought. The image of Jinuo appeared in her memories. Seeing this person again, she felt the breath of death even more clearly. And this feeling sits in her liver. The Weil family has noticed that Shuiyu has been acting strangely since she visited the royal palace. Catherine thinks that the girl is in a bad mood, because she doesn't even speak. Morel asked his mother if his sister was still asleep. The woman replied that she had sent a maid to her daughter, and the girl would join her soon. The elder brother had never seen Shuiyu being seen off. He assumed that the girl was sick. Avery also shared his guess that her sister was cursed. Catherine began to hit her son on the head so that he would not say anything like that. Morel thought for a moment and suddenly realized that his sister had seen something in the palace, which was why she was acting strangely. At this time, the king also sat thinking. He looked at the papers he had thrown in the trash not long ago. Then he took them out and was convinced that it was the same girl, the stray dog. Dr. David called Morel into his office to tell him the news. He did his best to help the boy with his request, and in the end, the king took pity. Shuiyu has been granted permission to study at the royal school, but it's too early to celebrate because the interview itself will be conducted by the king himself. Morel told his sister everything. Thus, if Shuiyu passed the interview with the king, she would be able to get an education. The girl was quite shocked. A gathering of scholars was taking place in the royal palace. One of the representatives was not thrilled with David's proposal to build schools on the territory of each noble family to educate the common people. It would also cost a lot of money. Another scholar supported this idea. He didn't like that they had to do the work of the abbey. Education on the Xinyu continent had been handled by the Pope for a long time. Therefore, the scholars are convinced that they continued to engage in these nonsense. Moreover, they did not see the point in ordinary people getting an education. Therefore, they asked Jinuo not to accept this decree. Shuiyu came to the king for an interview. She was alone in the huge palace and gradually began to feel nervous. The girl wished her brother Morel was by her side. The king was watching Shuiyu all this time. His assistant suggested calling the court ladies to escort the girl, as she looked frightened. But Jinuo did not allow this. He agreed that the girl was scared, and he also noted that she was weak and did not know what to do. However, the king noticed that Shuiyu was quite clever and thoughtful, and she acted more mature than her age. He emphasized that the girl was not as simple as she seemed, so he wanted to take a closer look at her. Shuiyu bowed to the king and greeted him. She didn't notice when Jinuo arrived and assumed that he had been watching her for a long time. The king asked the girl why she was not afraid of him. After that, Shuiyu thought about what to do. According to the novel, Jinuo is very cruel. Shuiyu needs to be careful because his mood changes like the weather. Her mother once said that His Highness should be respected as a god, so she should not be afraid of him. The girl admitted that last time she wasn't afraid of the king, she was more afraid of the unknown in the dark. Only evil people who don't know what status is are afraid. People with the appropriate status would not dare to do unworthy things. Shuiyu showered the king with praise and hoped that he would not punish her after this. Jinuo was not angry, although he guessed that the girl did not say all this from the heart. After all, such words were very familiar to him. It was as if he saw himself from the side when he was a little boy. After all, Jinuo had repeatedly responded in the same way to the one who sat on the throne, namely his sister. Jinuo directly asked the girl if she wanted to study at the royal school. The equator had been crossed, so there was no way to retreat, even if it meant exposing herself to danger. Shui Yu replied to the king that the school was a place where all the minds of the kingdom gathered. She wanted to become a powerful magician to control her destiny. As a result, the girl had to have tea with that scumbag Jinwo. He didn't understand why Shui Yu wanted to study, since she was only 5, 6 years old. Why should a girl waste these precious years and sweat over books? Shui Yu firmly stated that she wanted to become a magician. Jinwo noted that it was not for nothing that David himself recommended her, and it was probably he who taught the girl these words, not to attach importance to kinship and inheritance, but to go after your dream. Shui Yu continued to convince Jinwo, noting that His Highness was the most outstanding magician on the Xinyu continent. This was the kingdom's highest achievement in recent centuries. And it also far surpasses the achievements of the previous ruler. Shui Yu is convinced that Jinwo is much stronger than the previous ruler, and she thinks it is cool. The king's assistant agreed with the girl's words because he also thought Jinwo was cool. His Highness asked the girl about her brother. Shui Yu replied that her mural was the best because he entered the academy without entrance exams. She began to think that this royal idiot wasn't so scary after all. Jinwo also asked about the girl's skills as he wanted to test her. Shui Yu assumed that the king was planning to confuse her with such a question. But she needs to consolidate her position and show herself from the best side. But he is unlikely to be surprised by low-quality magic. Shui Yu remembered that she could tell the whole number pi. The people around her were delighted with the girl's phenomenal memory, but not the king. He had a terrible feeling of déjà vu, after which he ordered Shui Yu to be taken out of the palace. The aide informed the king that the girl was indeed difficult. He tested her with the magic of estimation, and she did not make a single mistake. As it turned out, the exact number of pi was known to the previous ruler, Ji Nuo's sister, and only she could recite it by heart. She was famous for her education and good memory. The king's sister was the only one who could memorize pi to the hundredths of a second, so the déjà vu that Shui Yu had caused triggered the current king. Shui Yu returned home in the carriage and wondered what she had done wrong. Ji Nuo, in turn, was so angry that he did not want to see anyone, even throwing out the maids. After the audience with the Veil's daughter, there was talk that His Highness was angry. Accordingly, everyone speculated that the girl had done something wrong. It was also assumed that the family would have a hard time after this. Shui Yu's mind was still racing with thoughts, even though a week had passed since that day. Fortunately, Ji Nuo did not give the order to punish the Veil family. Catherine was worried that there might be a scandal after Arnaldo found out. Murrell said that they were invited by a Dr. David, that talented people would gather there, so he thought that Arnaldo would be bored there. Shui Yu had never traveled that far before, and Catherine was worried. However, her daughter reassured her that she was not afraid with Murrell around. Dr. David invited Murrell and Shui Yu to live in his estate. Although the girl also suggested that the doctor had deliberately invited her to relax after the incident, Murrell assured her father that he would take care of his sister. Stephen doubted that David himself had suggested Shui Yu's candidacy. The eldest son noted that the teacher was a close friend of the emperor, so he did not think the emperor was very angry. Muriel wondered how the ruler of an entire kingdom could be offended by a child. Avery was outraged that their family was in danger and that his older brother was running away with a witch to save her. Muriel got angry with his younger brother and took him aside to calm down. Later, he asked Shui Yu if his sister was still worried about the meeting. Her brother specifically gave her a chance to unwind, so she didn't want him to worry about her. Shui Yu admitted that at first everything was fine, but then she didn't understand what happened. Suddenly, Ji Nuo became gloomy and quickly left. Murrell is convinced that even if his sister is not allowed to study, she was still able to get recognition from Dr. David. Moreover, Ji Nuo often gets angry for no reason. Shui Yu was nervous that her brother had started to speak openly about His Highness. Murrell reassured her sister, noting that no one was around. The sister began to get hysterical, thinking that the idiot king was angry. Muriel once again calmed the girl down because she was the first one to have an interview with His Highness. Shui Yu hugged her brother happily. She felt much better after talking to Murrell. She guessed that he had some kind of magic that could calm people's hearts. Dr. David greeted his brother and sister and said that he had a lot of papers for Murrell. Shui Yu was amazed to see the estate of a great scholar who was famous throughout the country. His Highness also visited the doctor at the estate. The assistant advised not to disturb David and to come another time. Ji Nuo, as the ruler of an entire kingdom, did not want to give in to others. David didn't know that Jinuo was going to visit his estate, so he couldn't greet him properly. He said that he would immediately order the estate to be closed to guests so that no one would disturb him. His Highness remarked that there was no need to do this. There was too much in his palace, so he came here to relax. He heard that David had invited scholars to collect materials. The doctor said that if general education was approved, it would be necessary to prepare materials to submit to Jinuo for review. At this time, scholars gathered at David's estate. He is sure that everyone will be delighted to learn that His Highness has personally come to check out the educational materials. David is no less delighted. He said that he would tell the scholars to greet Jinuo in the morning. The king said that it was not worth anticipating his actions. David nervously wiped his sweat, after which Jinuo added that he would take a walk, while the doctor would go about his business. The next day, the scientist's maids informed him that His Highness had gone hunting. The emperor's actions were difficult to predict, so David decided to be resistant to such changes. Zhu Yu liked being in the doctor's estate. She wanted to live like this forever. Everything in the Earl of Devonhill's estate was permeated with an atmosphere of literature and art. The girl pointed out to her brother that she hadn't brought any nice dresses with her, and Morel instantly cast a spell on her sister. He assured her that it was nothing to him, because it was middle-class magic and lasted a quarter of an hour. Yue Yu happily replied that a second would be enough for her, because now she was the most beautiful in the area. Murel kept his sister company for only a few days. He then began working on the documents that Dr. David had assigned to him. In addition to Murel, there were many scholars who compiled teaching materials for the Jingling Kingdom textbook. David noted that the materials needed to cover all areas. Murel wanted to add the ancient Jingling language, but not in-depth knowledge. He suggested leaving something like a breakdown of songs that everyone knows. David also noted that they hadn't thought of a name for the guide. The name should be formal and solemn, but not too fancy. Shui Yu suggested standard compulsory education, which would emphasize that everyone should receive education. David emphasized that education should be a joyful event, while Shui Yu sees it as an obligation. The girl expressed that only independent education will ensure access to education for all. The doctor agreed to call the manual that, and emphasized that they needed to try their best. He did not expect that the girl would be able to embody the meaning of the dream he had pursued all his life in one word. David stated that strong youth is a strong country and that it needs such talents. He emphasized that Murel's sister is a real treasure. Shui Yu was shocked to see His Highness. She smelled blood and fainted. The girl woke up in an unknown room and did not understand how she ended up there. The maids reported that Shui Yu had fainted, and His Highness had brought her to his chambers. Jinuo brought a black bear from hunting to present to the scholars. But no one expected the girl to be scared by what she saw. The bear was really very big and scary, only His Highness could kill it so quickly. Shui Yu was nervous when she found out what was in the pig's quarters. The maid insisted that the girl needed to rest. Morel had to work late in the library. After that, the girl jumped up and ran to her brother in an instant. Shui Yu noticed that Morel was busy, so she decided not to disturb him and went to the restroom. After a while, His Highness came into the restroom. He sat down near Shui Yu, and an awkward silence fell over the room. It seemed as if they were the only ones doing anything in the entire estate. Jinuo silently watched the girl. Shui Yu couldn't get the dessert, so without thinking twice, she asked His Highness for help. Jinuo looked at the girl suspiciously. She assured him that he was the only adult in the room, and she was not enough. His Highness did help Shui Yu, after which she happily thanked him. His Highness noticed that Shui Yu and his sister were completely different, and he felt much better about it. The aide was shocked that Jinuo was serving cakes to a little girl. But most importantly, Shui Yu asks His Highness for a favor. The assistant noted that the girl's character is friendly. She is not at all spiteful. Even his heart skipped a beat. Jinuo looked at his assistant angrily, and he took back his words, saying that he was not criticizing at all. Miss Shui Yu was not criticizing at all. She was an adult. His Highness pointed out that Shui Yu was just a little girl. He also ordered to get down to business. They received a secret message from the Crown Prince of the Boyar Empire. Morel apologized to his sister for not being able to spend time with her today. He should have stayed close to her when she passed out, but that would have been a dereliction of duty. Shui Yu assured him that his brother had to live in the manor. It was the king's order, and Morel could not go against it. She did not blame her brother because she was fine. Morel knew that his sister was at the estate thanks to the king's grace. However, deep down he was not happy about this, because the royal power had taken away his right to see his sister at an important moment. The boy remarked that the king had no understanding of family ties. Shui Yu pointed out that Morel's thoughts were too presumptuous. Logically, she should hate the pig king, because he sent her away when she was little and forcibly separated her from her mother. But she is happy about the little things he does for her. At the same time, the girl realizes that she is acting like a fool and needs to ignore the king. Muriel gives her sister a hat, which greatly cheers her up. Shui Yu immediately ran to the yard to play. After a while, the bird tried to tear the accessory off its head, but it only managed to pluck a small flower. The girl sadly watched from the window and noticed the hawk trying to take her hat. Shui Yu ran out into the yard to catch her offender. Soon she encountered the king and his guards. The aide asked if Shui Yu would like to return home in the carriage with the emperor. Shui Yu felt embarrassed that she had embarrassed herself because of the bird. The girl was surprised that this pig had allowed her to get into his carriage. But if she returned, Muriel would remain at Devonhill Manor to compile teaching materials. On the other hand, Catherine and Arnaldo missed her, and Morel would finally be able to concentrate on her work. Jinuo was slightly annoyed that Hampton had gotten away with putting the girl in the carriage. He planned to throw Shui Yu out if she was naughty. The carriage suddenly stopped. Shui Yu noticed another one, but she didn't know that the king had escorts. The girl had a dream where she was calling for her parents, when Jinuo took her hand. There were assassins ahead. Their target was the king. Hampton ordered the guards to protect His Highness. Shui Yu was shocked by what she saw. Jinuo understood that the girl should not see the murder and blood, so he covered her eyes with his hand. The king noticed that the guards could not cope with the attackers, so he intervened himself. Hampton checked on the king's guest to see if he was okay. The boy assured him that they had prepared well. Ever since Jinuo had received a secret message from the crown prince and had begun preparations. Heptami remarked that although their country was not very large, they had enough great wizards. The prince asked how the girl was, and the assistant replied that she was very frightened. The boy approached Shui Yu and tried to calm her down, but after the girl opened her eyes and noticed the blood, she immediately fainted. Hampton noticed that Shui Yu fainted whenever she saw blood. They soon brought the girl back to the Vale estate. The king's aide said goodbye to Shui Yu and said he was glad to meet her. The girl was grateful to both the king and Hampton personally. The family was happy to see Shui Yu, especially Arnaldo. He missed his little sister very much and is sure she missed him just as much. Avery just grimaced in annoyance. Besides Hampton and the pig, Shui Yu saw someone else, but she couldn't figure out who the second carriage belonged to. Avery spread his arms at his sides and demanded to know why his sister could smell black magic. Shui Yu pointed out that those who had learned this secret had long since left this world. The third brother was quite frightened, and Shui Yu laughed. He realized that his sister was only scaring him. The girl noticed that Avery also said a lot of terrible things to her, which is why they are flowers. The boy feels that Shui Yu has changed somehow. The following Wednesday, a welcoming ceremony and banquet were planned for the arrival of an important guest from the Boyar kingdom. Hampton asked the king if Her Highness would be present. Jinuo said that only if Alita wished it. Otherwise, the king will not have an escort. After all, Jinuo can appear at events without a female presence. Hampton handed His Highness a list of invitees for review. Jinuo noticed that Andy had invited Shui Yu and remembered how much fun he had with the girl at Dr. David's estate. Then he ordered Lady Juju and Princess Huaxing to be invited. Meanwhile, Shui Yu was writing a letter to Morel and planning to tell him what had happened to her on the way, but at the same time she wasn't sure if she should do it. The girl heard a strange sound and looked out the window but saw nothing. But the one who planned to attract her attention was sitting in a tree in the company of a hawk that had not so long ago tried to steal her hat. The boy wanted to apologize to Shui Yu because she fainted because of him. Then he decided that he would apologize to her at the banquet. Shui Yu appeared at the banquet and instantly attracted the attention of those around her. The girl was amazed that she was treated like an important guest. Even dukes were not treated like this. It was rumored that the banquet was being held to celebrate the arrival of a guest from the Boyar kingdom, and Shui Yu assumed it was Princess Boyar. Jinuo arrived accompanied by Princess Juju, and next to them was the youngest princess by title of Jinuo, the sixth princess, Huaxing. Previously, the king had not appeared accompanied by favorites. The guests noted that Lady Juju's troubles were now behind her, as the king now had two favorites. Queen Alita sacrificed herself for the little prince. She had already gone to the Tower of God. Shui Yu was shocked that the queen of a great power would voluntarily choose to serve God. Alita went there for the well-being of the prince, and this was not even her child. Shui Yu scolded herself. His Highness first came out with Princess Huaxing. Previously, he only loved Prince Zhaoban, but apparently everything had changed. Huaxing danced for the guests while Shui Yu imagined her mother voluntarily imprisoning herself in chains. The girl was sad until the little prince approached her. Shui Yu was surprised that the prince knew her. He noticed that the first time they met, she was only a millimeter away from him, although she fainted that time, so she didn't remember him. But Andy found it offensive that the young girl was acting as if they had never met. He rubbed the back of his head awkwardly, then turned his attention to his father, accompanied by the princesses. He assumed that Shui Yu was jealous because usually girls dream of becoming princesses, basking in the spotlight and wearing beautiful dresses. Andy remarked that the status of Princess Jingling was not something impossible for him if Shui Yu would go with him. He extended his hand to her and suggested that they meet again. Hampton interrupted the prince, noting that His Highness wanted to introduce Andy as the guest of honor. The prince asked Shui Yu to wait for him. Finally, the entourage met the prince of the Boyar Empire. Jinuo began to look for someone in the hall with his eyes. Then he asked Hampton if there were any other children at the banquet. After all, Andy and Huaxing would be missing their friends later during the masquerade ball. Hampton happily remarked if the king was trying to ask about Shui Yu. The assistant also expressed that he missed the girl. Although he had seen her recently, he had not had time to say hello and exchange a few words. Hampton added that he would later escort Prince Andy, Princess Huaxing, and Shui Yu to the ballroom. Jinuo sternly told the assistant to shut up. During the royal family's masquerade ball, it was customary to blur the boundaries between the upper and lower branches. That evening, people showed their true emotions and had fun to the fullest. The same was true for young children. In the novel, when Shui Yu met the queen, she was already in the Tower of God, just like the previous queen. Shui Yu planned to find a way to meet the queen in the tower. She accidentally bumped into Princess Huaxing and immediately apologized. Instead, the girl pointed out that Shui Yu hit her, so as an apology, she had to dress up in servant clothes. In masks, they looked alike, and someone might accidentally confuse them. Shui Yu suggested that Huaxing hit her too, and then change into the ruler's clothes. After all, she also didn't want people to confuse them. A tense atmosphere prevailed between the girls. Soon, Andy appeared and put a flower wreath on Shui Yu's head. Huaxing was indignant and thought that the prince had confused the girls, because a prince could not give a wreath to an ordinary girl. Huaxing began to ask Andy for a wreath for herself as well. However, the prince awkwardly asked who was in front of him. Huaxing took off her mask and tearfully declared that she wanted a wreath. Andy was confused when he saw the princess's tears. Shui Yu was indignant, then took the wreath off her head and gave it to Huaxing so that she wouldn't pretend to be a victim, since she didn't need the wreath. The prince caught up with the girl and grabbed her hand, then gave her a bracelet. Huaxing watched and trembled with envy and anger. The girl's mother approached her and asked who had hurt her. Huaxing assured her that she was fine. Shui Yu didn't understand why Andy was giving her the bracelet. The boy remarked that the jewelry belonged to her, and if she didn't take it, he would just throw it away. Shui Yu still decided to accept the gift, even though she didn't even know how old the boy was. A stranger approached Shui Yu and asked her to follow him because someone wanted to see her. The girl began to wonder who exactly wanted to meet her, but the man grabbed her in his arms and covered her mouth. Shui Yu felt a sharp sense of danger and remembered the spell, then used it on her attacker. The stranger said that he wanted to teach her a lesson, and that she would not be well after that. Andy intervened to protect Shui Yu and accidentally got injured. He asked the girl to wait while he dealt with the attacker. The prince felt that he was faced with a puppet who reeked of the mania of soul sacrifice. The attacker was surprised and could not understand why the boy knew the forbidden magic of the Boyar kingdom. Andy chased after the attacker, but the girl assured him that it was dangerous. She tried to convince those around her to help the prince, who ran after the monster. But no one believed her except Jinuo himself. He noticed that the girl was scared and asked her to tell him what kind of monster Shui Yu had seen. The man was first a companion and then turned into a monster. The girl added that Andy said it was a puppet. Shui Yu pointed in the direction the prince had run and asked to save him. Huaxing watched the conversation and was annoyed. The young girl confessed that Andy had saved her from the monster and then run after him. She was worried that the little prince would be okay. Gino assured the girl that Andy would be fine, but she needed rest. The puppet is magic from the Boyer Kingdom. 4 types of magical power were detected at the scene. In addition to Prince Andy's power in the puppet, there was a fireball. Jinwoo immediately understood that the fireball belonged to Shui Yu. Crown Prince Yujili activated the teleportation magic and will arrive in person. Shui Yu noticed Andy and ran to tell him that she was glad that everything was okay. However, the prince pushed the girl's hand away and told her not to touch him. The boy noticed their imperial bracelet on Shui Yu and demanded to know where she got it from. And he couldn't understand why Andy gave the bracelet to this girl. The boy assumed that Shui Yu had stolen the jewelry. The girl claimed that Andy had deliberately started a scandal with her, and she was just trying to make sure that the prince was okay. The guy noted that everything was fine with him. He grabbed Shui Yu's hand and wanted to finish the matter. She was determined not to give the bracelet to the prince. Upset by the situation, Shui Yu didn't notice when she ran into Zhao Ban.